If you've moved abroad and you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, like settling in, showing up and handling the practicalities, but you still feel like you don't belong here, this video is for you. There's not a dramatic loneliness, just that flat feeling where conversations end quickly, where you're the only one without history in the room and your mind starts to whisper, maybe I don't fit in here. By the end of this video, I want something to shift, not the feeling itself, but how you're reading it. There's one assumption that turns a normal experience into a personal verdict, and we're gonna come back to that. There's a belief that shows up for so many people after a move, and it can sound like self-reflection. In fact, it sounds really rational and sensible. If I was meant to be here, this wouldn't feel so isolating. Other people seem to have it all figured out, but I haven't. That must mean something. And that thought, it doesn't panic you or spiral, but it quietly connects the dots in the background of your mind. And that's exactly why it's so convincing. When loneliness shows up after a big life choice, especially one that we have chosen or you've chosen, the mind wants an explanation. It wants a cause, a conclusion it can stand on. I'm Hannah. I work with people who've moved abroad and find themselves in this exact moment. The move is done, the logistics are handled, and yet emotionally, something feels slightly out of sync. This interpretation of loneliness as evidence that you might have made a mistake or doing this move all wrong is one of the most common patterns I see after a big relocation. And this video isn't about telling you to push yourself harder socially. It's not about building a 5-step plan to finding friends, and it's not about pretending everything is just fine. It's about separating the feeling of loneliness from the meaning that you've attached to it. Because once loneliness becomes a verdict about your worth, your adaptability, or whether you belong here at all, it stops being a feeling and starts being a story. Loneliness after moving abroad is very often treated as evidence. Evidence that something went wrong, that you misjudged yourself, that this place isn't actually for you. But loneliness, especially in the early or the middle stages of relocation, is not evidence. It's information. And information needs to be interpreted, not judged. Think about how this phase actually feels. You can be surrounded by people all day and still feel unknown. You can hold conversations, laugh at the right moments, do all the socially appropriate things, and yet your body feels slightly braced, as if you haven't fully landed. Nothing is dramatically wrong here, which is exactly why it feels so confusing. So the mind, it fills in the gap. If I were more confident, this would be easier. If I were more outgoing, I'd have found my people by now. If this were right, I wouldn't have to try so hard. In coaching conversations that I have, this is often the moment someone realizes that they've actually been grading themselves on an experience no one taught them how to measure. Because what's actually happening is much simpler. You are new in a system that already existed before you arrived. There are shared references that you don't have yet, rational shorthand that you haven't built yet. And that gap is uncomfortable, but discomfort is not the same thing as misalignment. When loneliness gets translated into this character assessment, it stops being about transition and it starts being about identity. And that's when it hurts more than it needs to. Here's what often gets missed. Belonging doesn't form at the same speed as logistics. You can often sort housing, the paperwork, your work, bank accounts, transport, all of that, sometimes within weeks. But relational orientation, it moves very differently, much more slowly. Your system is still learning the tone of this place, the humor, the pauses, those invisible rules about closeness, about distance. That learning process rarely feels dramatic. It often feels really awkward and clunky and, quite frankly, tiring. I've watched many capable people interpret this effort as personal failure, when in reality, they're simply early in the process that takes time to root. That belief named earlier interrupts that rooting. Remember, if I don't feel connected yet, I must not fit in here. And once that belief, it starts to settle in, Loneliness gets monitored and you start checking it, comparing it, evaluating whether you should still be feeling this way. Now, the feeling isn't just present, it's actually under surveillance, and that tightens everything. You might still go out, still meet people, still try, but underneath, it's this self-consciousness that takes over, a sense of I'm performing here, while also assessing yourself. That's not because you're socially incapable. It's because judgment tends to shrink space. And loneliness without judgment, it's uncomfortable, yes, but it also moves. Loneliness with judgment becomes really sticky, heavy, repetitive, and almost always turns inwards. So here's the shift I want to offer. What if this phase isn't asking you to decide anything yet? What if it's not asking you to conclude whether you belong, or whether you made a mistake, or whether you need to change yourself? What if it's simply asking you to read correctly? Loneliness after moving abroad often means that your reference points are gone. Your shared history hasn't reformed yet. Your sense of being casually understood is still rebuilding. And that is not failure, that's transition. And transition, by definition, is disorientating. When people have the space to see it in that way, instead of rushing to solve it, something can soften here. Not because the feeling disappears, but because it stops being personal. And when it stops being personal, it becomes workable. So here's a question you don't need to answer neatly. What changes if this feeling is information, not a conclusion? You don't need to feel better or fix anything. Just notice what happens when you stop prosecuting yourself for a normal response to upheaval. Loneliness after moving abroad or just to the other side of the country is so very common. Interpreting it that it's proof that you chose wrong is optional. This video isn't here to promise that everything will work out. It's here to loosen one assumption that may be making this phase heavier than it needs to be. In the next video of this playlist, we'll look at why feeling disconnected after a move isn't a social failure, but a timing gap between you and your environment. Go ahead and watch that next. It builds directly on this. And if you're sitting in this quiet space, turning it into a verdict about yourself, this is exactly the kind of work that I do with clients. I help people separate transition from misalignment so that they can move forwards without urgency distorting their decisions. You'll find details about working with me and joining my emails in the description below. For now, let this phase be something you're inside, not something you're being judged by.